What if I told you that scattered across the world's most pristine waters lie the rotting remains of criminal empires worth billions? Private islands that once hosted the world's most feared drug lords, corrupt oligarchs, and financial masterminds now sit abandoned, reclaimed by nature, their luxury pools drained, their golden fixtures tarnished, their secrets buried beneath overgrown jungle vines. This isn't fiction. These are real places where unimaginable wealth met ultimate downfall. Islands where Pablo Escobar's 300-room mansion now shelters wild pigs, where El Chapo's wife once threw million-dollar parties, and where Jeffrey Epstein's mysterious temple still stands empty, holding secrets that may never be revealed. Today, we're stepping inside the private islands abandoned by the world's richest criminals. From cocaine-fueled Caribbean paradises to oligarch super yachts turned floating prisons, these stories reveal the dark truth about criminal wealth. No matter how much money you steal, no matter how many islands you buy, gravity always wins in the end. Let's start in the Bahamas, 1978. A small, peaceful island called Norman's Cay was about to become the most important piece of real estate in the global drug trade. Carlos Later, a Colombian-German smuggler and key figure in the Medellin cartel, had identified a critical problem: moving massive quantities of cocaine from Colombia to the United States. While other traffickers were still using human mules carrying small amounts on commercial flights, Later was thinking bigger, much bigger. He purchased Norman's Cay for millions and immediately began transforming this tropical paradise into a militarized logistics hub. The existing airstrip was extended to 1,000 meters, over 3,300 feet, specifically designed to handle a fleet of aircraft that could carry multi-ton shipments of cocaine directly to clandestine strips in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. But this wasn't just about the airstrip. Later turned Norman's Cay into a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the beaches with Doberman attack dogs. A sophisticated radar system monitored all air and sea traffic. Local residents were systematically harassed until they fled, leaving the island under Later's complete control. The numbers were staggering. At its peak, Norman's Cay was generating an estimated $300 million annually for Later alone. That's over $1 billion in today's money, every single year. And the lifestyle? Witnesses describe scenes that sound like a fever dream. Naked women driving Land Rovers to meet arriving pilots, continuous parties fueled by unlimited cocaine and cash. Carlos Toro, a Medellin cartel representative, recalled how the island operated like a hedonistic playground where normal rules simply didn't exist. For 4 years, Norman's Cay was untouchable. Later had allegedly bribed Bahamian Prime Minister Lyndon Pindling and other high-ranking officials, creating a protective bubble around his operation. The island became a sovereign criminal state, 210 miles off the Florida coast. But in 1982, everything changed. Diplomatic pressure from the United States finally overwhelmed local corruption. The Bahamian government launched a series of raids that dismantled the smuggling hub. Later was arrested in 1987 and extradited to the U.S., where he received a life sentence. Today, Norman's Cay is a ghost of its former self. The most prominent reminder of its criminal past is the half-submerged wreckage of a Curtiss C-46 Commando that crashed in shallow water during a drug run in 1980. This rusting skeleton now serves as a dive site, a chilling underwater monument to an era when paradise was twisted into a militarized warehouse for the cocaine trade. The island that once generated hundreds of millions in drug money now attracts tourists curious about its dark history. The airstrip remains, overgrown but visible, a concrete scar across what was once Later's criminal kingdom. Our next stop takes us to the Rosario Islands off the coast of Colombia, where one of the most famous criminal island myths was born. For years, travel agencies and social media influencers have promoted visits to a sprawling white ruin on Isla Grande, claiming it was Pablo Escobar's secret island getaway. The ruins are undeniably impressive, a grandiose complex of luxury buildings situated between the Caribbean Sea and dense tropical forest, featuring white concrete walls, marble flooring, and 1980s-era color schemes dominated by coral pinks and pastel blues. The complex was designed to include a main mansion, waterfront apartments, and a palm court centered around an enormous swimming pool. According to the tourist narrative, this was where Escobar held secret cartel meetings and lavish parties, complete with gold shower heads and hidden escape routes. The story was perfect clickbait. The world's most notorious drug lord's secret island paradise. But here's the problem. It's not true. Investigative work by local journalists and government records reveal that this property, known as Casa Blanca, was actually an ambitious hotel project owned by the family of former Colombian President Julio César Turbay. Government inspections from 2002 and 2013 identify the owner as Antonio Turbay, the former president's cousin. The project was halted by the Colombian government due to environmental concerns, specifically its potential impact on surrounding coral reefs within the Corrales del Rosario y San Bernardo National Natural Park. The building was never completed, which explains why it appears unfinished and abandoned. The historical evidence makes any Escobar connection highly unlikely. The Medellin cartel had kidnapped and murdered Julio César Turbay's daughter, Diana Turbay, in 1991. The idea that Escobar would have any association with a Turbay family property is absurd. Yet the myth persists. Local boat captains discovered that the Escobar Island story generates significantly more tourism revenue than the truth about a failed hotel project. The legend became more profitable than reality. Today, the ruins stand as a testament to the power of myth over fact. The forest has reclaimed the ornately tiled pathways. A family of wild pigs now lives in what was once intended to be lush gardens. The drained swimming pool, with its chipped blue edges, has become a symbol of unfulfilled ambition, whether criminal or commercial. This isn't just about a mistaken tourist attraction. It reveals how our fascination with criminal wealth creates its own mythology, sometimes more compelling than the truth. Now we move to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Jeffrey Epstein created perhaps the most sophisticated criminal island operation of the modern era. Unlike the drug transshipment hubs of the 1980s, Little St. James was designed for something far more sinister: the systematic abuse of victims and the protection of a global network of powerful accomplices. Epstein purchased the 70-acre island in 1998 for $7.95 million and later acquired the adjacent Great St. James in 2016 for $17.5 million. Over 2 decades, he spent millions developing a sprawling estate that included multiple villas, a library, a Japanese bathhouse, a movie theater, and a distinctive structure with a gold dome often referred to as a temple. The 2025 release of documents and photographs by the House Oversight Committee provided a forensic look into the interior of these structures, revealing disturbing features that align with survivors' accounts of abuse. Among the most chilling discoveries, a professional-grade dental chair situated in a yellow room, surrounded by 10 masks of men's faces mounted on the wall. A chalkboard containing words like power, deception, political, and intellectual. A telephone with a speed dial list including names like Darren, Mike, Patrick, and Rich. The island's operations were facilitated by a dedicated fleet of transport, including a boat marked LSJ and private aircraft operated by Hyperion Air. Bank records from JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank, reviewed in late 2025, indicate that these islands served as financial nodes through which vast sums were funneled to maintain the operations. The presence of the dental chair and the enigmatic men's masks have fueled ongoing investigations into the specific nature of activities conducted on the island. The chalkboard writings, specifically the emphasis on power and deception, suggest a preoccupation with the mechanics of influence and control. Following Epstein's death in 2019 and a subsequent $105 million settlement with the U.S. Virgin Islands government, the islands were sold to billionaire Stephen Dekoff for $60 million in 2023. Plans were announced to transform the site into a luxury resort, but development has remained stagnant. The delay underscores the taint that often accompanies criminal properties. Despite the pristine Caribbean location, the history of horrific crimes makes these islands nearly impossible to redevelop. The infrastructure of secrecy that Epstein built has become a permanent scar on paradise. Today, Little St. James stands as a monument to how extreme wealth can create spaces entirely outside normal, legal, and moral boundaries. The island that once hosted the powerful and connected now sits empty, its secrets slowly being revealed through ongoing investigations. Our next chapter takes us into the modern era of criminal wealth, where private islands aren't just land, they're floating palaces that can move between jurisdictions at will. Following Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, an unprecedented international crackdown targeted the luxury assets of Russian oligarchs, revealing a new form of criminal island, the super yacht. These weren't just boats. They were floating sovereign territories, some over 500 feet long, equipped with helipads, submarines, swimming pools, and crews of dozens. They represented the ultimate evolution of the criminal island concept. Mobility combined with luxury, allowing their owners to stay one step ahead of international law. The scale of the crackdown was unprecedented. The U.S. Justice Department's Task Force Klepto-Capture, initiated in March 2022, targeted billions in assets across the globe. Consider the Amadeo, owned by sanctioned oligarch Suleiman Karimov. This 348-foot floating palace was seized in Fiji and moved to San Diego. The Dilbar, owned by Alisher Usmanov, stretches 512 feet and was immobilized by German authorities. The Tango, belonging to Victor Vekselberg, was seized in Spain with U.S. assistance. But the crown jewel was the Alpha Nero, an 267-foot super yacht that became the subject of an international legal battle. The vessel, linked to sanctioned Russian businessmen, was searched in Antigua and Barbuda as authorities tried to determine its true ownership through layers of shell companies. These seizures extended beyond vessels to include luxury real estate. In France, authorities seized an estimated $75 million in Riviera property, including villas in Saint Raphael and Grimaud linked to Russian businessmen Ruslan Goryukin and Mikhail Opengim. The 1MDB scandal represents perhaps the most extreme example of state-level embezzlement used to fund a lifestyle of island-hopping luxury. Joe Low, a Malaysian financier, allegedly misappropriated more than $4.5 billion from the One Malaysia Development Berhad Fund. A significant portion was used to purchase a 300-foot super yacht, luxury apartments in New York and Beverly Hills, and a massive collection of fine art. The super yacht was eventually seized and its proceeds returned to the Malaysian government, but Low himself remains a fugitive, reportedly hiding in jurisdictions that refuse to honor Interpol warrants. These floating islands represent the evolution of criminal wealth in the 21st century. Unlike fixed islands that can be easily targeted, super yachts offered the illusion of mobility and protection, but as the 2022 crackdowns proved, even the most sophisticated criminal wealth structures are vulnerable to coordinated international action. Today, many of these seized vessels sit in ports around the world, their crews dismissed, their luxury amenities gathering dust. They've become floating monuments to the limits of criminal wealth in an interconnected world. As we've seen across these stories, the abandonment of criminal islands follows a predictable pattern. It's rarely gradual. It's usually the result of sudden, catastrophic collapse, triggered by one of three mechanisms. First, extradition and jurisdictional pressure. As we saw with Norman's Cay and Carlos later, the utility of a private island depends entirely on the cooperation of the host government. Once international pressure, specifically from the US DEA and State Department, overrides local corruption, the sanctuary becomes a trap. Second, asset forfeiture and legal taint. Properties like Epstein's Little St. James or the yachts of Russian oligarchs are seized under civil and criminal forfeiture laws. Once a property is officially tainted by criminal evidence, its commercial value plummets, and it enters a state of legal limbo where no one is willing or able to maintain it. Third, violent displacement and retaliation. For figures in the drug trade, the abandonment of luxury estates often follows massive military raids and the seizure of blood money real estate portfolios. In some cases, the fear of retaliation from rival criminal organizations can lead to sudden flight, leaving luxury goods and vehicles exactly as they were. The study of these abandoned islands reveals a recurring cycle of hubris and entropy. These figures sought to build unassailable fortresses of luxury and power. Yet the very isolation that provided initial protection ultimately ensured their downfall. Without the constant flow of illicit funds and political protection, the harsh marine and tropical environments rapidly reclaimed these structures. The gold showerheads and marble courtyards are inevitably replaced by moss-covered walls and wild pigs. The rusting skeleton of the drug plane at Norman's Cay, the unfinished Casablanca Hotel on Isla Grande, the silent mask-adorned rooms of Little St. James, and the sea's super yachts gathering dust in international ports. These aren't just ruins. They're physical manifestos of the instability inherent in empires built on crime. They serve as stark warnings that while wealth can buy an island, it cannot buy lasting sovereignty from the inevitable reach of the law or the steady reclamation of nature. For every criminal who thought they had found the perfect hideaway, reality eventually came calling. These abandoned islands tell us something profound about the nature of criminal wealth. No matter how much money you steal, no matter how many politicians you bribe, no matter how many islands you buy, you're always building on quicksand. The higher you rise, the harder you fall. And in the end, paradise always reclaims what was never truly yours. But the story of criminal islands doesn't end with abandonment. Right now, as we speak, new criminal empires are building their own island fortresses, convinced they'll be different from those who came before. If you want to see how modern criminals are using cryptocurrency and digital assets to build the next generation of untouchable wealth, you need to watch this video where I break down the billion-dollar crypto empires that think they're beyond the reach of any government. Click here to discover the new criminal islands of the digital age.